In some absolutely big time breaking news, Vince McMahon could be returning to WWE. It's not could be. It looks like this is what's happening. I'm Omer from Real Take Wrestling. We have so much to talk about. I know there are people asking about sources and all that kind of stuff, guys. I'm going to get into it right away. I won't waste too much time. I just want to make sure everyone first hits that like button and subscribes if you haven't already for all the latest wrestling news. In a bombshell report, another bombshell report, I should say, from the Wall Street Journal, it says that Vince McMahon is making a return to WWE. This is, again, from the Wall Street Journal, Lauren Thomas. And, again, the Wall Street Journal has been a major player in this entire Vince McMahon saga that has played out. It says that that Vince McMahon is making a return, and he sent a letter to the board of directors. He, being Vince McMahon, sent a letter to the board of directors back in December indicating that he wanted to come back. This coincides with another Wall Street Journal report that said that Vince did, in fact, want back in WWE. I'm going to read from that letter right here. It says, and I quote, "Mr. McMahon, who has a majority voting power through his ownership of WWE's Class B stock, has told the company that he is electing himself and two former co-presidents and directors, Michelle Wilson and George Barrios, to the board," the people said. The move to reinstate Mr. McMahon, which the board previously rebuffed, and others, will require three current directors to vacate their position. So Vince McMahon is basically saying, as the leading shareholder, I am coming in, I am replacing the three other directors, and I'm putting in my own people as well as myself. The report goes on to say, Mr. McMahon's new role will enable a unified decision-making through the company's upcoming media rights negotiations and a parallel full review of the company's strategic alternatives, which Mr. McMahon believes is the right course of action and in the best interest of the WWE and the WWE shareholders amidst the current dynamics in the media and entertainment industry. So from that portion of it, we can take that Vince is likely looking to come in, facilitate a sale and these media rights fees, or a sale ahead of these media rights fees coming up, and essentially cash out. I think that is what this is. I think it's a twofold thing, right? And again, this part is not from the report. This is my analysis of this. It looks like what Vince is doing is he's coming in, he's saying that I'm back, I'm going to help facilitate a sale so that I can get out and I can get mine. I can get something out of this company that I have built. And then on top of that, I can put in my people, and I can maybe reclaim some power here. Because, again, if Vince is back in, it's a whole different ballgame in WWE. Now, I'm going to read more from this report. It says, quote, Mr. McMahon's new role will enable I already read that part. We're going to go forward in the report. It says, as Mr. McMahon has communicated to the board, he believes that there is a narrow window of opportunity to create significant value for all shareholders, and that to do so, the strategic alternatives review must occur in tandem with the media rights negotiations. He also expressed to the board that he believes that these initiatives require Mr. McMahon's direct participation, leadership, and support as the controlling shareholder. Now, we all know that Vince McMahon left retired, I should say, from WWE in disgrace back in July following these accusations of sexual misconduct and following a review that found that he had paid $12 million in these hush money payments to former employees. The fact that Vince McMahon, and excuse me if I cut out Okay, no. Can we hear me? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure that was all set and we weren't having any reverb from the mic. But this is a big time deal, guys. This is a big deal because This is Vince McMahon saying, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be executive chairman of the board, and I'm going to conduct a thorough review of the entire company ahead of 2024. What's so big about 2024? That is when the media rights for Raw, SmackDown, NXT, well, that's when they're up. That's when WWE gets to renegotiate their position in these TV rights deals. And ahead of that, Vince is coming in saying, I'm going to oversee this. Not anyone else, not Stephanie, not Nick Khan, no one else, me, for the company that I built, him being Vince McMahon. And it really goes with a lot of what we heard from the previous Wall Street Journal report back in December that said that Vince wanted back into WWE and that he was going to try to make a play. At the time, a lot of us thought that, hey, maybe this is just him being bored. He's going to get sick of it. He's just going to move on. Everyone else has moved on. He will eventually as well. It does not seem like that is the case. We got MGT, so many others in the chat. We got Keith in the chat asking source. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. I did just read an aggregation from a Bleacher Report by Joseph Zucker, but the original report is in Wall Street Journal for those of you who want to find it. It won't take too much. You just Google Vince McMahon. You will be able to see the full report in the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, this is, again, huge news. So let's go through some of these other chats. I see MGT is here. Welcome, MGT. Guys, by the way, if you're just joining us, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. Job in the chat saying, good, now he'll run it into the ground and AEW will flourish. I mean, AEW doesn't necessarily need WWE to be bad to flourish. I think those two can exist. But I will agree with MGT here. I'm sure there are a lot of AEW fans who are happy about this. And look, I'm an AEW fan. I can be a WWE fan as well. But I'm a wrestling fan first. And I think that Vince being involved in professional wrestling, I think, is bad for wrestling. That has been my stance for a while now. And I'm going to stick to it. Job in the chat says Vince didn't want him. Him being who? Got MGT in the chat saying Bray Wyatt was going to come back whether Vince was in charge or not. Job says, I bet Bray wishes he would have taken the AEW deal. I mean, I don't believe that there was an AEW deal even on the table with Bray Wyatt. Tony Khan had said that he hadn't talked to Wyndham Rotunda, a.k.a. Bray Wyatt, outside of a birthday party, I believe, something to that effect. But there didn't seem to be any indication that there were negotiations between those two sides anyway. MGT in the chat says, tradition continues. Job says, maybe there's new women's wrestler. Well, I'm not going to get into any of that. But again, and to me, right, that what you just said there is a big problem and why I don't believe that Vince McMahon should be anywhere near this company. It's why I believe Vince McMahon should, especially if the end game here, right, if it's more than just what the report says it is. Because right now the report says that he's coming in, conducting a review, putting his people in place, and essentially going to help facilitate some sort of either sale in these negotiation fees and all that kind of stuff. If the end game is for him to be back in and running creative, that is, I think, in my opinion, that is detrimental to especially the women on your roster, given his history, given the fact that people have been very public about his history, especially recently, given the fact that his name has been in the news associated with things like sexual misconduct and even worse. It is difficult for me to reconcile those things, honestly. And the other big news out of all this that we're somehow glossing over, obviously, is that the company possibly is pursuing a sale here. The thing that we discussed throughout the pandemic, related to all of these budget cuts, related to all of this news, the news of WWE potentially going up for a sale was also kind of just thrown in with this news of Vince McMahon returning. And and that in itself is a big deal. We're talking about the biggest wrestling company in the world. And if we were talking about, what WWE could go for, we'll get into that too. Because WWE, it's not going to be cheap to get WWE. Think about what UFC went for just about like 7 years ago. UFC sold for $4 billion. That was 7 years ago. And that's not given the assets that WWE has. WWE has weekly television that draws ratings. Whether or not you want to, I know people like to argue about what those ratings are. You keep that to yourself. The bottom line is weekly ratings at the same time. That's good for advertisers. That's good for networks. They're going to want that. There's value in that. And on top of that, you have an existing 10-year agreement with Peacock. You have an existing agreement throughout the world for all these media rights fees. There's so much that WWE has to offer. They're gonna and plus we're in the time where their stock is kind of inflated given all the past budget cuts and all that kind of stuff. This company is going to sell for more than $4 billion. I don't know what the end is going to be. If I had to put a guess on it, it would be somewhere in the $6 billion mark. That is my ballpark guess. Because, and I don't think it's going to be for anything less than that. And there's a possibility this could go for, I have heard analysts say upwards of $8 billion, maybe even $10 billion, depending on what the next round of media rights fees look like. And that is big. That is big. And we don't know what changes could come with that. Could we see changes to the creative? Could we see changes to the presentation of WWE? So much comes with that we don't really think about. We just see these numbers and we're captivated by, $8 billion, $6 billion, $7 billion, all that stuff, right? So it's a big deal. That's all I'm saying. It's a big, big deal. You got MGT in the chat saying Tony Khan is just a rich for business that happens to be run a wrestling promotion. I mean, he is rich, and that word has been thrown around to describe Tony Khan, but I will say this. I do believe that Tony Khan is a very good booker of professional wrestling. Job in the chat says, if you're a Wrestling First fan, you've got to be disgusted with what Vince has done to wrestling. Tony Khan knows what's going on in wrestling. I go back and watch some of my other live streams about the Vince McMahon situation. I have been crystal clear about my stance on Vince McMahon. I've been crystal clear about my stance on Vince McMahon in wrestling, outside of wrestling, as a human being. I don't need to defend my stance, I believe, and that's what I'm going to say. We got Job in the chat saying more pay-per-views where storylines will weekly have the heels kick the babyface's ass, and then the pay-per-views are good, will always win. I mean, it's possible. If he ever comes back to creative, that's possible, but right now that has not been reported. I want to be clear. It has not been reported that Vince will return in a creative situation or in a creative role. For right now, he is going to be the executive chairman of the board, and he's going to bring in two of his people, essentially, to replace some other members of the board and kind of facilitate, it would look to be facilitate a sale. That is all indications from this report. Excuse me. By the way, guys, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. The past year of pro wrestling news has been absolutely just bonkers when we really think about it. I mean, we've seen the departure of Cody Rhodes from AEW, going to WWE, having that great moment at Mania. We've had the return of Stone Cold, which was somehow, some way, just like Stone Cold and his return in the main event of WrestleMania was somehow overshadowed. It is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. But yeah. And there's a lot of news coming out like about what's going on. We got Job in the chat saying, "Oh, come on. You don't believe that, do you?" I don't believe what, Job? But yeah, there's this is big. This is big, guys. I think we're gonna wrap up the stream in just a few more minutes, right when we hit that 30-minute mark. So about 9 or so more minutes on the stream, and then I will release a separate video, kind of discussing and synthesizing all of the news bits from this, and I'll post that on the channel as well. But This is big news. This is absolutely big news. Vince is forcing his way back into WWE, and a lot of the talent, that's the other thing, is coming out right now about this. I believe according to Fightful, Fightful Select, I should say, a lot of the talent were in the dark about this. The talent didn't know about this. And you got to think that if you're a talent and you came in and you believe this to be a new era in WWE, a new regime, the Triple H regime, and you see this, it does make you think. It really does. And the most interesting thing about this is we talked about momentum in the past year of wrestling, right? We've talked about momentum and how much momentum has changed. We talk about the first dance. A lot of the momentum was going towards AEW, right? That's what it was. And then you talk about Vince McMahon, this story. It was really when momentum started changing in favor of WWE. You had this story, you had the return of Cody Rhodes, and then you had the story that Triple H was going to be the guy to replace it. Momentum was on WWE's side, and I'm going to be interested to see what happens here. MGT says, what has Vince done to wrestling that I should be disgusted about? You mean making it mainstream? No. Well, here's the thing. Vince McMahon did not make professional wrestling mainstream. That I 100% disagree with that argument. And the reason why I disagree with it, it's not because I have a personal gripe against Vince McMahon. People are gonna say, y'all gonna say what you want to say. It's fine. At the end of the day, this is pro wrestling. But looking back at wrestling, looking back at what it was, we should not pretend that wrestling was not a draw before WWE went mainstream, went global. We should not pretend. Wrestling was a major draw by itself without Vince McMahon. That is the truth. You go back to the golden era of professional wrestling, the Gold Dust Trio, who started the big boom in professional wrestling in the early 20th century. Like, it was a thing. People were drawing. Like, you like the names like Luthez, the names like Big Billy Sandow, who's one of the best promoters in professional wrestling history, and part of the Gold Dust Trio. Like these were the guys who really revolutionized and paved the way for someone like Vince McMahon to come in and make his company, not wrestling, his company, the global juggernaut in professional wrestling. That is the thing that happened, right? Because you had all of these territories, even regionally across the world. Go to India. You had Gama in India. In Japan, you had Ricky Dozan. You had Antonio Inoki. You had Giant Baba. You go like it's not like Vince McMahon came in the 1980s and said wrestling is global now because I say it, and because no. He turned WWE into a global juggernaut, and from a business standpoint, he did great because he turned his company into a global sensation. That's what he's responsible for. He's responsible for turning WWE mainstream. That is what he's responsible for. He is not responsible for turning wrestling mainstream because wrestling was mainstream already without him. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that WWE for the past 30, 40, 50 years has been saying that professional wrestling started basically in 1984 when WrestleMania began. And here's the thing. It's a cute little fable that WWE tries to tell us. And it was really cute when we were younger. But if we go back and look at the houses that were being drawn by regional territories, you go to WCCW, who were selling out Cowboy Stadium. You go in the Northeast, with places selling out Shea Stadium. You go down south in Puerto Rico, where they were still selling out stadiums without any WWE involvement, even back into the mid 2000s. So, I just come on. I genuinely and again, this is not a personal thing. I look at the facts of the situation. I just don't agree, and it's fine. We can disagree, guys. At the end of the day, it's pro wrestling. We're allowed to disagree about pro wrestling. It is what it is. We got Joe in the chat saying, you're right, mainstream. I remember wrestling being unpredictable. MGT says wrestling being unpredictable is when people thought it was real. I think yes and no. I mean, wrestling is still unpredictable today, and we all know it's not real. And I think it sometimes it takes those realistic aspects to kind of make it a little more unpredictable. But even now, like, there are things that are unpredictable in pro wrestling. Like I think it depends on what we're talking about. Yes, when people believe pro wrestling was real, was a lot of it more unpredictable? Sure, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't exciting, or it doesn't mean that it's not exciting right now. If that makes sense, because just because something isn't quote unquote unpredictable doesn't mean it's not exciting. I think you could argue that there's a lot more excitement about pro wrestling now than there was 10 years ago in general. Job in the chat says, "Are you kidding? People have been on wrestling since it began." I mean, yeah, people have been on wrestling since the carnival days. Like, that's the thing people forget. Wrestling outgrew the carnival days pretty like quickly in the late 1800s and became its own act. I did a video on my other channel, youtube.com/Real Take Sports, where I kind of went in a little bit to the history of pro wrestling. If you search Sports Revisited, the original Montreal Screwjob, you'll see what I'm talking about, and I kind of go into. It's more of a documentary style kind of video that I made, but Sports Revisited, Montreal Screwjob. Just search that in YouTube, and it'll come up. But yeah, I just Vince McMahon made WWE into a global juggernaut, and I think that is undeniable. I just don't agree that it was pro wrestling. We got MPA in the chat saying, "Can't wait till Vince takes over creative." I mean, I can wait for that. It's so weird. This is one thing I think a lot more fans are going to be unified behind, is that people don't want Vince McMahon to return in a creative position in WWE. But here's the thing, and this is all speculation from my end, right? If Vince is returning to the company in a key power position, like chairman of the board, it's very easy, I think, for me to think that Vince is going to find a way to make himself at least involved in the creative process. I find it hard to believe that he can resist that if he has that power. But guys, this is going to be the end of this stream. I will release a video kind of condensing all of the jumbled mess that I just spoke over the past 30 minutes into a smaller video, and a more concise video, and really focus on the news bits of this. But we will stay updated on all of this. Vince McMahon is returning. We got Job in the chat saying, "You can always tell who will win a WWE TV match from the bell. Whoever is getting their butt kicked is going to win the match." Now, that's predictable. You could argue the same thing, I think, about other wrestling too, but like, wrestling can be predictable, and that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I think the way I view wrestling more so is, does what we're seeing make sense? And I think that's the way I view it. But guys, thank you for your questions. Be sure to hit that like button if you haven't already done so. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're going to have another video coming out about this very soon, kind of updating the situation. So stay tuned and keep it real.